She had submitted the threat assessment report 3 times. Each time, it was filed under non-combat personnel observations and promptly forgotten. When she requested to attend the patrol briefing, the sergeant major chuckled and suggested she focus on restocking bandages instead. So she sat quietly in the medical tent, organizing supplies while the infantry prepared for what they assumed would be a routine reconnaissance mission. Then the first shots rang out across the valley, echoing off the mountain walls in a pattern that made her blood run cold. The radio crackled with panic as voices reported impossible angles, precise targeting, and coordinated fire from positions that shouldn't exist. In the chaos that followed, someone finally noticed the medical tent was empty, and everything they thought they knew about their quiet combat medic was about to change forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the Afghan mountains like smoke from a dying fire, thick enough to obscure the tree line but thin enough to let shafts of golden sunlight pierce through in scattered columns. Forward Operating Base Serpent sat nestled in a valley that had seen more blood than rain in the past decade, its concrete barriers and razor wire a stark contrast to the ancient beauty of the surrounding peaks. The air carried the familiar cocktail of diesel fuel, dust, and the metallic tang that never quite left a place where violence was a daily possibility. Staff Sergeant Maya Shen moved through the medical compound with the measured efficiency of someone who had learned to find order in chaos. Her combat medic bag hung from one shoulder, its contents organized with surgical precision. Every pocket contained exactly what she needed, positioned where muscle memory could find it incomplete. Darkness. The olive drab patches on her uniform were faded from countless wash cycles, but the red cross on her helmet remained vivid, a beacon that had guided wounded soldiers to safety more times than anyone cared to count. Around her, the base hummed, with the controlled energy of another day beginning in a war zone. Soldiers emerged from their quarters, weapons slung, heading toward the chow hall or their duty stations. The mechanics were already at work on the motor pool, the sound of air compressors and impact wrenches, creating a mechanical symphony that would continue until well after dark. Guard towers maintained their silent vigil, their occupants scanning the horizon for threats that might emerge from the maze of valleys and ridges that stretched beyond the perimeter. Maya paused at the entrance to the Tactical Operations Center, her hand resting on the weathered handle of the reinforced door. Through the small window, she could see the briefing room where the morning's patrol leaders were gathering around. A sand table model of the local terrain. Captain Rodriguez stood at the head of the table, his pointer tracing routes through miniature mountains and valleys that represented real places, where real people would walk in real danger within the hour. She had spent the previous evening updating her threat assessment, cross-referencing incident reports with topographical maps and weather patterns. The data painted a picture that troubled her, a pattern of enemy activity that suggested something more sophisticated than the usual harassment tactics. Sniper teams had been repositioning along the eastern ridgeline, their movements coordinated in a way that indicated professional training and excellent intelligence about coalition patrol routes. Maya knocked twice on the doorframe before entering, her boots making soft contact with the concrete floor. The conversation around the sand table paused as heads turned toward her, expressions ranging from mild curiosity to barely concealed annoyance. She recognized the look, the slight tension that appeared whenever the medical personnel ventured into spaces traditionally reserved for the trigger pullers. Sergeant Chun, Captain Rodriguez acknowledged with a nod that was polite but clearly dismissive. Medical brief can wait until after the tactical overview. She remained standing at attention, folder held at her side. Sir, I have updated intelligence regarding potential sniper activity along Route Diamond. But pattern analysis suggests. Pattern analysis? Staff Sergeant Brooks interrupted from across the table, his tone carrying the casual condescension that combat infantry sometimes reserved for support personnel. When did medics start doing intelligence work? A few chuckles rippled through the room. Maya felt her jaw tighten slightly, but her expression remained neutral. She had learned early in her career that getting defensive only reinforced the stereotypes that kept people from taking her seriously. The medical logs include casualty reports with wound patterns and vectors, she explained calmly. Cross-referencing with patrol routes and terrain features can reveal. Look, Doc, Sergeant Martinez cut in, using the nickname that somehow managed to sound both respectful and patronizing at the same time. We appreciate you keeping our boys patched up, but let us handle the tactical side of things. Your job is to fix them when they come back broken. Captain Rodriguez raised a hand to restore order, but his expression suggested he agreed with the sentiment. Sergeant Chen, we've got experienced spotters and intelligence analysts for threat assessment. Your expertise is medical care, and we need you focused on that mission. Maya nodded once, sharply. Understood, sir. She turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. The patrol route passes through a natural choke point at grid reference 41, SMD, 234,567. The casualty data suggests overlapping fields of fire from concealed positions. I've prepared detailed medical evacuation protocols for that area. Noted. Rodriguez replied, but his attention was already returning to the sand table. Dismissed. She stepped back into the corridor, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow felt like a judgment. The folder containing her analysis remained unopened, its contents unread, its warnings unheeded. Maya had spent months documenting the increasing sophistication of enemy tactics, the gradual evolution from opportunistic attacks to coordinated ambushes. The data was clear to anyone willing to look at it objectively, but objectivity was apparently a luxury reserved for those who carried rifles instead of medical bags. The walk back to the medical tent took her past the armory, where soldiers were drawing ammunition and checking weapons for the day's patrols. She could hear the familiar sounds of military efficiency, the metallic snap of magazines being inserted, the whispered curses as someone discovered a malfunction, the steady rhythm of equipment being inspected and prepared. These were sounds that most medics learn to tune out, background noise to the more important business of saving lives. Maya did not tune them out. She listened to the rate of fire being discussed, the ammunition loads being distributed, backup procedures being reviewed. Years of treating gunshot wounds had taught her to think like the weapons that caused them, to understand ballistics and trajectories and the terrible mathematics of violence. It was knowledge that made her better at her job, but knowledge that others seemed to find unsettling in someone whose primary mission was healing. The medical tent was a sanctuary of controlled chaos, organized in a way that made sense only to those who understood the brutal triage of battlefield medicine. Supplies were arranged not by alphabetical order or military standard, but by the frequency with which they would be needed when wounded soldiers began arriving. The most critical items were within arm's reach of the primary treatment station, while less urgent supplies occupied the periphery. Maya moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency, checking inventory levels and expiration dates, ensuring that every piece of equipment was exactly where it needed to be. The work was methodical, almost meditative, a way of imposing order on a world that seemed determined to remain chaotic. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar tasks while her mind continued processing the threat assessment that had been so casually dismissed. The radio on her belt crackled to life, carrying the voice of the patrol leader as his team prepared to move out. Serpent Base, this is Viper 6. Patrol departing Checkpoint Alpha. 12 personnel. Estimated return time 1400 hours. Maya paused in her inventory check, glancing at the topographical map pinned to the tent wall. Red pins marked the locations of previous casualties, creating a pattern that would have been obvious to anyone who bothered to look. The Eastern Ridgeline was developing into a killing field, with overlapping sectors of fire that could turn a routine patrol into a disaster. She reached for her radio, then hesitated. The patrol was already moving, and another attempt to voice her concerns would only result in another dismissal. Instead, she turned to her equipment locker and began pulling out items that were not typically part of a standard medical loadout. The ghillie suit was carefully wrapped in plastic, its intricate pattern of natural and synthetic fibers, designed to break up the human silhouette in mountain terrain. Maya had acquired it during a previous deployment, trading medical supplies to a reconnaissance unit in exchange for specialized equipment that most medics would never need. The suit had been modified to accommodate her medical gear, with hidden pockets and attachment points that would allow her to carry both life-saving supplies and other tools. Beside the ghillie suit, wrapped in oil-soaked cloth, lay her personal rifle. The weapon was not standard issue, but rather a precision instrument that she had assembled from carefully selected components. The barrel was free-floating, the trigger group had been professionally tuned, and the optic was a high-end variable power scope that cost more than most soldiers made in a month. It was the kind of rifle that raised questions about why a medic would need such capabilities. Maya had learned to shoot as a child, growing up on a ranch where long-range accuracy was a necessary skill for predator control and hunting. The military had refined that natural ability, transforming a farm girl who could hit jackrabbits at 300 yards into a precision marksman who could place shots with surgical accuracy at distances that most infantry would consider impossible. But she was a medic, not a sniper. Her job was to heal, not to kill. The rifle was supposed to be for emergency situations only, a last resort when medical evacuation was impossible and wounded soldiers needed protection from threats that were beyond the range of standard infantry weapons. She had never fired it in combat. Until today, she had never needed to. The radio crackled again, this time with the voice of the patrol's forward observer. "Viper 6, this is Viper 2. We've got eyes on the objective. No movement, no contacts. Looks quiet." Maya folded the ghillie suit carefully, placing it in a specialized pack that would allow for rapid deployment. The rifle went into a custom-made case that was designed to look like standard medical equipment from a distance. Anyone who bothered to inspect it closely would quickly realize that it contained something other than bandages and morphine. But most people didn't look closely at medical supplies. The patrol route would take them through the valley floor, following a path that offered good visibility and multiple exit routes. It was a textbook approach to movement in hostile territory, following all the procedures that had been developed through decades of hard-won experience. The problem was that the enemy had also been learning, adapting their tactics to counter the predictable patterns of coalition forces. Maya's analysis had identified 17 separate positions along the Eastern Ridgeline where a skilled marksman could engage targets in the valley below. The positions were mutually supporting, with overlapping fields of fire that would make it impossible for a patrol to find cover once the shooting started. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. More importantly, the positions were beyond the effective range of standard infantry weapons, meaning that the patrol would be unable to return fire effectively. She had marked each position on her personal map, noting the elevation, range, and likely fields of fire. The information would have been invaluable to the patrol leader if he had been willing to listen to input from someone whose job was supposedly limited to fixing broken bodies. The morning sun was climbing higher, burning away the mist and revealing the stark beauty of the Afghan landscape. The mountains rose in jagged peaks that seemed to claw at the sky, their slopes covered in a mixture of rock and sparse vegetation that had somehow managed to survive in this harsh environment. It was terrain that favored the defender, offering countless hiding places and natural shooting positions for anyone patient enough to use them effectively. Maya completed her equipment check and sealed the packs, then sat down at her field desk to review the medical evacuation procedures one more time. The helicopter landing zone was located 3 kilometers from the patrol route, accessible via a narrow path that would be completely exposed to fire from the ridgeline. If casualties occurred in the anticipated kill zone, extraction would be extremely difficult under the best circumstances. She opened her notebook and began sketching alternative evacuation routes, looking for covered approaches and concealed positions that could provide protection for wounded soldiers. The work was detailed and time-consuming, requiring her to consider multiple variables including terrain, weather, and the likely response of enemy forces to a medical evacuation attempt. The radio traffic continued in the background, providing regular updates on the patrol's progress. They were moving according to schedule, following their planned route with professional efficiency. The reports were routine, almost boring in their predictability. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected, which was precisely what worried Maya the most. She had seen this pattern before, during previous deployments in other theaters. The enemy would allow coalition forces to establish predictable patterns, gathering intelligence and planning their response. Then, when the timing was right, they would strike with devastating effectiveness. The key was recognizing the setup before it was too late to respond. Maya keyed her radio, deciding to make one more attempt to voice her concerns. Viper 6, this is Serpent Medical. Request permission to accompany patrol as additional medical support. The response came after a long pause, during which she could almost hear the eye-rolling that was undoubtedly occurring in the patrol. Leader's position. Serpent Medical Viper 6. Negative on medical accompaniment. We have organic medic support and your position is required at base. Viper 6. I have updated threat assessment that suggests increased sniper activity along your route. Recommend adjustment of patrol path to avoid Serpent Medical Viper 6. The patrol leader's voice carried a note of irritation that was barely concealed. We have received no intelligence updates regarding sniper activity. Continue to monitor medical nets and maintain readiness for casualty evacuation. Viper 6 out. Maya stared at the radio for a long moment, then returned it to her belt. She had done everything she could through official channels, following proper procedures and chain of command. The fact that her warnings had been ignored was frustrating, but not surprising. In the military, expertise was often defined by job classification rather than actual knowledge and experience. She stood and walked to the tent entrance, looking out across the valley toward the ridgeline where she was certain enemy snipers were already in position. The sun was high enough now to create harsh shadows on the mountain slopes, providing perfect concealment for anyone who knew how to use the terrain effectively. Somewhere out there, professional killers were probably adjusting their scopes and calculating wind drift, preparing to turn a routine patrol into a catastrophe. The morning routine continued around her, soldiers going about their duties with the casual efficiency that came from months of deployment. The cooks were preparing lunch, the mechanics were working on vehicles, and the intelligence analysts were reviewing their reports in air-conditioned comfort. It was a normal day at a forward operating base, indistinguishable from dozens of others. That had passed without incident. Maya returned to her desk and opened her personal journal, a habit she had maintained throughout her military career. The entries were brief and factual, documenting events and observations that might be useful for future reference. Today's entry would be different, she realized. Today's entry would either record another boring day of routine operations, or it would mark the beginning of something that would change everything. She picked up her pen and began to write, documenting her threat assessment and the responses she had received. The words flowed easily, describing the pattern of enemy activity. and the vulnerability of the patrol route. When she finished, she closed the journal and placed it in her equipment locker, beside the ghillie suit and the rifle that she hoped she would never need to use. The radio crackled again, this time with a routine position report. Serpent Base. Viper 6. Patrol reaching Checkpoint Bravo, continuing mission as planned. Maya checked her watch and noted the time on her map. The patrol was exactly on schedule, following their planned route with clockwork precision. In approximately 30 minutes, they would reach the natural choke point where the valley narrowed between two steep slopes. It was there, according to her analysis, that the enemy would likely spring their trap. She began gathering her equipment, moving with the careful efficiency that came from years of preparation. The ghillie suit went into her pack, along with additional medical supplies and ammunition for the rifle. The weapon itself was broken down and placed in its camouflaged case, ready for rapid assembly if the situation demanded it. Maya was not abandoning her post or disobeying orders. She was positioning herself to provide the best possible medical support to the patrol when they needed it most. The fact that her definition of medical support included capabilities that most medics did not possess was simply a matter of being prepared for any contingency. The walk to the perimeter gate took her past the command post, where she could see officers gathered around radio equipment and computer screens. They were monitoring the patrol's progress, tracking their movement through the valley with the detached professionalism that came from being safely removed from the actual danger. It was a perspective that she had once shared before experience had taught her that safety was always an illusion in a combat zone. The gate guard was a young soldier who had arrived with the latest rotation, still enthusiastic about his deployment and eager to prove himself. He snapped to attention as Maya approached, his rifle held at the ready position that regulations required. "Sergeant Chun," he acknowledged with a crisp salute. "Heading out for medical resupply?" Maya nodded, adjusting the weight of her pack. "Routine supply run to the forward aid station. Should be back by evening." The guard consulted his clipboard, running his finger down the list of authorized movements. Maya's name was not on the list because she had not requested permission to leave the base. The omission was deliberate, a way of avoiding the questions and delays that would have inevitably followed. "I don't see you on the movement log," the guard said, his tone apologetic but firm. "I'll need to check with the operations center." Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to the guard with a smile. "Emergency medical resupply request, signed by the base medical officer. They're expecting me at the forward position." The document was authentic, though it had been prepared weeks earlier for a different mission that had ultimately been canceled. The signatures were genuine, the routing numbers were correct, and the medical terminology was sufficiently technical to discourage close scrutiny. Most importantly, it looked official, which was usually sufficient to satisfy gate guards who were more concerned with following procedures than understanding them. The guard studied the paper for a moment, then handed it back with a nod. "Looks good, Sergeant. Stay safe out there." Maya stepped through the gate and began walking toward the valley, her pace steady but not hurried. Behind her, the base continued its daily routine, unaware that one of its medics was about to redefine the boundaries of her job description. The morning sun felt warm on her back, and the mountain air carried the scent of wildflowers and pine trees, a reminder that beauty could exist even in places where violence was always possible. The trail that led toward the patrol route was well worn, carved by years of military foot traffic and civilian use. It wound through terrain that was simultaneously beautiful and deadly, offering spectacular views of the surrounding mountains while providing countless hiding places for potential threats. Maya moved with the careful awareness that came from understanding that every step could be her last, her eyes constantly scanning for signs of danger. After 30 minutes of steady walking, she reached a position that overlooked the valley where the patrol was operating. The elevation provided an excellent view of the terrain, allowing her to see the natural choke point where she expected the ambush to occur. More importantly, it put her within range of the ridgeline positions that she had identified as likely sniper hides. Maya found a concealed position behind a cluster of rocks and began unpacking her equipment. The ghillie suit went on first, its carefully crafted camouflage breaking up her outline and helping her blend into the surrounding terrain. The rifle was assembled next, its components fitting together with the precision that came from countless hours of practice. She settled into a prone position behind the rifle, adjusting the scope and checking the wind conditions. The valley stretched out below her, peaceful and seemingly empty. There was no sign of the patrol yet, but they would be arriving soon, following their predictable route into what she was certain would be a carefully prepared killing field. The radio on her belt crackled with another position report. Serpent Base, Viper 6. Patrol approaching Checkpoint Charlie, all elements accounted for. Maya keyed her radio, speaking in a low voice that would not carry beyond her immediate position. Viper 6, this is Serpent Medical. I have overwatch on your position. Recommend extreme caution approaching the narrow section ahead. The response came after a long pause, the patrol leader's voice carrying a mixture of surprise and irritation. Serpent Medical, what is your position? You are not authorized to be off base. Viper 6, I am in position to provide medical support if needed. I have observed possible sniper activity on the eastern ridge. Recommend, Serpent Medical, you are ordered to return to base immediately. We do not require medical support. At this time, Maya lowered the radio without responding, her attention focused on the ridgeline where she had spotted the first sign of movement. A slight shift in the shadows, barely perceptible but unmistakably human. Someone was up there, someone who was very good at remaining concealed, but not quite perfect. She adjusted her scope, bringing the distant position into sharp focus. The magnification revealed a carefully camouflaged hide, its occupant barely visible through the natural cover. The person was armed with a precision rifle, its barrel just visible through the camouflage netting. As Maya watched, the sniper made a small adjustment to his position, bringing his weapon to bear on the valley below. The patrol appeared around. A bend in the trail, 12 soldiers moving in a tactical formation that would have been textbook perfect under normal circumstances. They were alert and professional, their weapons ready and their spacing appropriate for the terrain. Unfortunately, they were also walking directly into a trap that had been prepared by someone who understood their tactics better than they understood his. Maya keyed her radio again, her voice urgent but controlled. Viper 6, you have at least one sniper in position on the eastern ridge, approximately 800 meters from your location. Recommend immediate cover and withdrawal. Serpent Medical, maintain radio silence. We have no visual confirmation of hostile activity. Through her scope, Maya could see the sniper settling into his final firing position. The angle was perfect, the range was well within the capabilities of a skilled marksman, and the patrol was moving directly into his crosshairs. In approximately 60 seconds, the shooting would begin, and soldiers would start dying. She made a decision that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. Maya Chen, combat medic, keeper of the Hippocratic Oath, dedicated saver of lives, began the process of taking one instead. The crosshairs settled on the sniper's position, the image crystal clear through the high-powered scope. Maya controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate and steadying her hands in the way that had been drilled into her through countless hours of training. The rifle felt familiar in her hands, an extension of her will and intent. The shot would have to be perfect. At this range, with this target, there would be no second chance. Miss, and the sniper would disappear back into the rocks, only to emerge later when the patrol was even more vulnerable. Hit, and she would have crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. transforming herself from a healer into something else entirely. Maya squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, the sound of the shot echoing across the valley like thunder. Through her scope, she saw the enemy sniper's body jerk and then go still, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers, to clatter against the rocks below his position. Before she could fully process what she had just done, movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Another sniper, this one in a different position, was bringing his rifle to bear on the patrol below. Then another, and another. The ridgeline was crawling with enemy marksmen, all of them now revealed by the sound of her shot. Maya's radio exploded with confused chatter as the patrol leader tried to understand what was happening. Serpent Base. Viper 6, we have sniper fire unknown origin. Taking cover and assessing situation. She was already shifting her position, bringing her rifle to bear on the second sniper. The enemy marksman was good, but he had been caught by surprise, his attention focused on the patrol below rather than potential threats from other directions. Maya's second shot took him in the chest, spinning him around before he collapsed. Behind his rocky barricade, the third sniper had learned from his comrade's fate, adjusting his position to make himself a more difficult target. Maya could see just the edge of his rifle barrel and a small portion of his camouflaged form. It was a challenging shot, requiring her to thread the bullet through a narrow gap in the rocks, but it was within her capabilities. The bullet found its mark, and the third sniper disappeared from view. Maya was already moving again, knowing that staying in one position too long would make her an easy target for the remaining enemy marksmen. The ghillie suit helped conceal her movement, but she was operating in terrain that the enemy knew better than she did. As she shifted to a new firing position, Maya caught sight of the patrol below. They had taken cover behind a collection of boulders, their formation tight and disciplined despite the chaos of the ambush. The patrol leader was on his radio, calling for support and trying to coordinate a response to threats that he could not see. Maya keyed her own radio, speaking quickly and clearly. Viper 6, this is Serpent Medical. I have eliminated 3 enemy snipers on the eastern ridge. You have at least 12 more in various positions. Recommend immediate withdrawal to your last covered position. Serpent Medical, confirm your position and authorization for engagement. Viper 6, authorization is staying alive. I count 15 total enemy positions on the ridge. They're trying to flank your position from the north. Even as she spoke, Maya was tracking another target, a sniper who was attempting to move to a position that would give him a clear shot at the patrol's covered position. The enemy marksman was skilled, using the terrain to mask his movement. But he was operating in an environment where every rock and shadow was potentially occupied by a threat. Maya's fourth shot caught him in mid-stride, sending him tumbling down the rocky slope in a cloud of dust and debris. The sound of his fall seemed to echo across the valley, a reminder of the deadly mathematics that were playing out on the ridgeline above. The remaining enemy snipers were beginning to realize that they were being hunted by someone who possessed skills that matched or exceeded their own. Maya could see them adjusting their positions, trying to locate the source of the precise fire that was systematically eliminating their comrades. Their movements were becoming more cautious, more defensive, as they shifted from predators to prey. Maya's fifth target was attempting to use a spotting scope to locate her position, the glass lens catching the sunlight in a brief flash that revealed his location. The shot was longer than the previous ones, requiring her to compensate for wind, drift, and bullet drop across nearly 1,000 meters of mountain air. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and through her scope, she saw the enemy sniper's body jerk and then go limp. The radio traffic from the patrol was becoming more urgent, as the soldiers began to understand the scope of the threat they were facing. Maya could hear the patrol leader coordinating with base, calling for air support and artillery fire on the ridge positions. The response was predictable. Assets were not immediately available, and the patrol would have to handle the situation with organic weapons until reinforcements could arrive. Maya shifted position again, this time moving to a location that would give her a better angle on the northern section of the ridge, where several enemy snipers were attempting to establish new firing positions. The movement required her to expose herself briefly to potential observation, but the ghillie suit and her knowledge of the terrain provided adequate concealment. Her sixth shot eliminated a sniper who was attempting to engage the patrol from an elevated position that would have been nearly impossible to detect from ground level. The enemy marksman had been confident in his concealment, but Maya's elevated position gave her a clear view of his hiding place. The bullet struck him in the head, ending his threat permanently. The seventh and eighth shots came in rapid succession, targeting two snipers who were attempting to coordinate their fire on the patrol's position. Maya had spotted them communicating through hand signals, their movements synchronized in a way that suggested professional training and experience. Both shots found their marks, leaving the enemy coordination in ruins. By now, the remaining enemy snipers were beginning to panic. Their carefully planned ambush had turned into a nightmare as an unseen marksman systematically eliminated their comrades with surgical precision. Maya could see them abandoning their prepared positions, attempting to withdraw to more defensible locations deeper in the rocky terrain. She would not allow them to escape. Each enemy sniper who remained alive was a potential threat to future patrols, a killer who would return to claim more coalition lives if given the opportunity. Maya had crossed the line from healing to killing, and she intended to finish what she had started. The ninth shot caught a fleeing sniper as he attempted to bound between cover positions, the bullet striking him in the back and sending him sprawling across the rocky ground. The 10th shot eliminated another enemy marksman who was attempting to provide covering fire for his retreating comrades, his rifle falling silent as Maya's bullet found its mark. Maya's radio crackled with an update from the patrol leader, his voice carrying the mixture of relief and confusion. Serpent Base, Viper 6. Sniper fire has ceased. We are observing what appears to be enemy casualties on the ridge. Request permission to investigate. Negative, Viper 6. Maintain defensive positions and await air support. Unknown friendlies engaging targets on the ridge. Maya smiled grimly at the designation. Unknown friendly. It was an accurate description, she supposed, though it failed to capture the complexity of what was happening on the mountainside. She was friendly to the patrol, certainly, but she was proving to be decidedly unfriendly to the enemy snipers who had planned to kill them. The 11th shot was one of the most difficult, requiring her to engage a target who was partially concealed behind a large boulder. Only the sniper's rifle barrel and a small portion of his shoulder were visible, but it was enough for someone with Maya's skills and equipment. The bullet struck the enemy marksman in the shoulder, spinning him around and causing him to drop his weapon. Maya watched through her scope as the wounded sniper attempted to crawl to safety, leaving a trail of blood on the rocky ground. She could have finished him with a follow-up shot, but wounded enemies sometimes provided valuable intelligence. Instead, she shifted her attention to the 12th target, a sniper who was attempting to establish a new firing position further up the ridge. The shot was at the extreme range of her capabilities, requiring her to compensate for significant bullet drop and wind drift. Maya took extra time to calculate the shot, adjusting her aim point and controlling her breathing. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and she watched the bullet's flight through her scope, tracking its path across the valley. The enemy sniper jerked and fell backward, his weapon clattering down the rocky slope. Maya's 12th shot had found its mark, leaving only 3 enemy marksmen still capable of fighting. The ambush that had been planned with such care was now in complete disarray, the hunters having become the hunted. The 13th shot came as one of the remaining snipers attempted to engage Maya's position directly, having finally located the source of the devastating fire that was destroying his unit. The enemy marksman was skilled, his shot coming close enough to chip rock near Maya's position. But close was not good enough in a precision shooting contest. Maya's return fire was immediate and accurate, the bullet striking the enemy sniper in the chest and ending his threat permanently. The 14th shot followed quickly, targeting another sniper who was attempting to use the distraction of his comrade's engagement to establish a firing position on the patrol below. The final enemy sniper was the most skilled of the group, a professional who had managed to remain concealed throughout the engagement while his comrades were systematically eliminated. Maya could see signs of his presence, but could not pinpoint his exact location. He was moving carefully, using the terrain to mask his position while attempting to line up a shot on either Maya or the patrol below. The deadly game of cat and mouse continued for several minutes, each participant trying to outmaneuver the other in the rocky terrain of the ridge. Maya's training and experience were matched against an enemy who had survived years of warfare through skill and cunning. It was a contest that would be decided by the smallest margin of error. Maya finally caught sight of movement in a position that she had already checked twice, a testament to her opponent's skill at camouflage and concealment. The enemy sniper was preparing to take a shot at the patrol, his rifle aimed at the boulder where the soldiers had taken cover. Maya had perhaps 2 seconds to prevent him from completing his mission. Her 15th and final shot was perfect, the bullet striking the enemy sniper in the head and ending the threat forever. The ridge fell, silent except for the wind whistling through the rocks and the distant sound of the patrol's radio traffic. Maya had eliminated 15 enemy snipers in a display of marksmanship that would have been impressive under any circumstances, but was particularly remarkable given that she was supposed to be a medic. The radio crackled with an update from the patrol leader, his voice carrying a note of awe that was barely concealed. Serpent Base, Viper 6. All hostile fire has ceased. We are observing multiple enemy casualties on the ridge. Request guidance on next course of action. Maya keyed her radio, speaking in the calm professional tone that had carried her through countless medical emergencies. Viper 6, this is Serpent Medical. Ridge is clear of active threats. Recommend immediate withdrawal to base while you still have the opportunity. Serpent Medical, confirm your position and status. Are you injured? Maya looked down at her hands, which were still steady despite what she had just accomplished. The rifle lay beside her, its barrel warm from the sustained fire. 15 enemy snipers lay dead or dying on the ridge, their ambush transformed into a massacre through the intervention of someone who was supposed to save lives, not take them. Viper 6, I am mobile and uninjured. Recommend you move now before enemy reinforcements arrive. Roger, Serpent Medical. We are beginning withdrawal. Request you maintain overwatch until we reach safe positions. Maya settled back behind her rifle, scanning the ridge for signs of additional threats. The immediate danger had passed, but the enemy rarely operated in isolation. There could be additional snipers in the area, or quick reaction forces moving to investigate the loss of their comrades. The patrol would remain vulnerable until they reached the safety of the base perimeter. As she watched the soldiers begin their tactical withdrawal, Maya reflected on what she had just accomplished. 15 enemy snipers eliminated with 15 shots, each one a perfect example of precision marksmanship under combat conditions. It was a feat that would have been remarkable for a trained sniper, but was almost impossible to believe from someone whose primary job was providing medical care. The patrol moved with professional efficiency, their formation adapted to the threat of additional snipers, while maintaining speed toward safety. The silence that followed the final shot was deafening in its completeness. Maya remained motionless, behind her rifle, eyes scanning the ridgeline through her scope with the methodical precision of someone who understood that survival often depended on noticing what others missed. The ghillie suit that had seemed cumbersome earlier now felt like a second skin, its carefully woven fibers helping her blend seamlessly with the rocky terrain. Below in the valley, the patrol had begun their withdrawal with the disciplined efficiency that came from months of training and experience. Maya could see them moving from cover to cover, their formation adapted to account for the possibility of additional threats while maintaining the speed necessary to reach safety before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Each soldier moved with purpose, their weapons ready, and their attention focused on the terrain around them. The radio traffic had shifted from the urgent chatter of combat to the more controlled communications of a tactical withdrawal. Maya listened to the patrol leader coordinating with base, providing updates on their position and requesting continued overwatch support. The responses from the operations center carried a tone of confusion that was barely concealed beneath military professionalism. No one quite understood what had happened on the ridge, only that 15 enemy snipers had been eliminated by someone who was not supposed to be capable of such actions. Maya's radio crackled with a direct communication from the base commander, Colonel Harrison's voice carrying the authority that came from years of command experience. "Serpent Medical, this is Serpent 6. Confirm your identity and provide immediate status report." She keyed her radio, speaking in the same calm tone that she used when treating wounded soldiers. "Serpent 6, this is Staff Sergeant Maya Chun, Combat Medic. I am in Overwatch position providing security for the returning patrol. Sergeant Chun, you are not authorized to be off base. Explain your current position and actions." Maya paused before responding, watching the patrol continue their movement toward safety. The question of authorization seemed almost irrelevant given the circumstances, but military protocol demanded adherence to chain of command even in situations that fell outside normal parameters. "Serpent 6, I observed enemy activity that posed an immediate threat to the patrol. I moved to a position where I could provide medical support and security overwatch as needed. Sergeant Chun, are you claiming responsibility for the elimination of hostile forces on the ridge?" The question hung in the air like smoke from the rifle shots that had preceded it. Maya understood the implications of her answer, the way it would fundamentally change how others viewed her and her capabilities. She was a medic, a healer, someone whose primary mission was preserving life rather than taking it. Admitting to killing 15 enemy snipers would transform her from a support soldier into something else entirely. "Serpent 6, I engaged hostile forces that posed an immediate threat to coalition personnel. 15 enemies have been neutralized." The silence that followed was longer than the tactical pause that had preceded her shots. Maya could almost hear the conversations that were undoubtedly taking place in the operations center, the questions being asked and the implications being considered. A combat medic who could single-handedly eliminate an entire sniper team was not something that fit neatly into established military categories. When Colonel Harrison's voice returned, it carried a note of carefully controlled surprise. "Sergeant Chun, maintain your current position and continue overwatch until the patrol reaches base. We will debrief this incident upon your return." Maya acknowledged the order and returned her attention to the valley below, where the patrol was making good progress toward the safety of the base perimeter. The soldiers moved with confidence now, their earlier tension replaced by the relief that came from surviving an encounter that could have ended very differently. They had no way of knowing that their survival was due to the intervention of someone who was supposed to be organizing medical supplies rather than engaging in precision marksmanship. The ghillie suit that concealed Maya's position had been carefully crafted over months of deployment, its pattern adapted to the specific terrain and vegetation of the Afghan mountains. Each piece of synthetic and natural material had been positioned to break up the human silhouette while allowing for freedom of movement and weapon employment. It was the kind of specialized equipment that raised questions about why a medic would need such capabilities, questions that Maya had deflected with vague references to medical evacuation procedures and force protection requirements. The rifle that lay beside her was equally specialized, a precision instrument that had been assembled from carefully selected components during her previous deployment. The barrel was free-floating and hand-lapped. The action had been blueprinted and trued, and the trigger had been professionally adjusted to break at exactly 2 pounds with no overtravel or creep. The scope was a high-end variable power optic that cost more than most soldiers earned in 2 months. Its glass clear enough to resolve targets at ranges that exceeded the capabilities of standard infantry weapons. Maya had acquired the components through a network of contacts that existed in the gray areas between official procurement and personal initiative. The rifle was not listed on any property book, carried no serial numbers that could be traced through military channels, and existed in a bureaucratic limbo that allowed it to be employed without raising uncomfortable questions about authorization and mission parameters. She had justified the weapon's existence as a tool for protecting wounded soldiers during medical evacuations in areas where helicopter landing zones were beyond the range of infantry support weapons. The explanation was technically accurate, though it failed to capture the full scope of her intentions when she had first begun assembling the rifle. Maya had always understood that the distinction between healing and protecting was often measured in fractions of inches and split seconds of timing. The patrol's progress toward base was steady but cautious, their route chosen to maximize available cover while maintaining speed toward safety. Maya tracked their movement through her scope, noting the professional manner in which they adapted their formation to account for changing terrain and potential threats. These were experienced soldiers who had survived months of deployment through skill and teamwork, but they had been walking into a carefully prepared kill zone that would have left most or all of them dead without outside intervention. The enemy snipers had chosen their positions with professional competence, establishing overlapping fields of fire that would have made escape impossible once the shooting began. The ambush site was a natural choke point where the valley narrowed between steep slopes, forcing the patrol into a confined area with limited options for cover or maneuver. It was the kind of terrain that favored the defender, offering concealment and elevation advantage to anyone patient enough to use it effectively. Maya's analysis of the enemy positions revealed a level of tactical sophistication that exceeded the usual capabilities of local insurgent forces. The snipers had been equipped with precision rifles and high-quality optics, their positions carefully camouflaged and mutually supporting. More importantly, they had demonstrated the patience and discipline necessary to allow the patrol to enter the kill zone before initiating contact. These were not opportunistic fighters taking advantage of a chance encounter, but professional soldiers executing a carefully planned operation. The implications of that realization were troubling. Professional sniper teams required extensive training and expensive equipment, resources that suggested support from external sources with sophisticated military capabilities. The enemy forces operating in this region were evolving beyond the FA's capabilities of local recruitment and training, developing into a threat that required correspondingly sophisticated countermeasures. Maya's radio crackled with an update from the patrol leader, his voice carrying the relief that came from reaching familiar territory. Serpent Base, Viper 6. Patrol approaching checkpoint Delta, estimate 5 minutes to base perimeter. She keyed her radio, maintaining her professional tone despite the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. Viper 6, Serpent Medical. I have visual on your position, no observed threats. Recommend maintaining current route and speed. Serpent Medical, we copy. Outstanding work up there. Don't know how you did it, but you saved our lives today. The acknowledgement was simple and direct, soldier-to-soldier recognition that transcended questions of job classification and authorization. Maya had done what needed to be done when it needed to be done, using whatever skills and equipment were necessary to protect her fellow soldiers. The fact that those skills fell outside the normal expectations for a combat medic was irrelevant compared to the results she had achieved. Maya began the process of breaking down her equipment, disassembling the rifle and packing the ghillie suit with the same methodical care that she brought to organizing medical supplies. Each component was cleaned and secured in its designated location, ready for rapid deployment if circumstances required it again. The process was automatic, ingrained through countless repetitions during training and previous deployments. The walk back to base would take approximately 40 minutes, following a route that would keep her concealed from potential observation while allowing rapid movement if threats emerged. Maya had planned the route during her initial movement to the overwatch position, identifying covered approaches and alternative paths that could be used depending on the tactical situation. As she prepared to move, Maya reflected on the transformation that had occurred during the past hour. She had begun the day as a combat medic whose warnings were dismissed and whose expertise was questioned. She was returning as someone who had single-handedly eliminated 15 enemy snipers in a display of marksmanship that would be difficult to explain or replicate. The change was fundamental and irreversible, marking a transition from one role to another that would affect every aspect of her military career. The ghillie suit came off first, its synthetic and natural fibers carefully folded and packed to prevent damage during movement. The suit represented hours of work adapting patterns and materials to the specific requirements of mountain terrain, creating a tool that was both functional and nearly invisible when properly employed. Maya had learned the techniques from reconnaissance specialists during previous deployments, trading medical knowledge for tactical skills that most medics would never need. The rifle was broken down into its major components, each piece wrapped in protective material and secured in the custom case that had been designed to resemble standard medical equipment. The breakdown process was rapid but careful, ensuring that each component was protected from damage while maintaining the ability to reassemble the weapon quickly if circumstances required it. Maya's medical equipment remained exactly where it belonged, organized and ready for immediate use in treating wounded soldiers. The juxtaposition was striking, life-saving supplies packed alongside the tools of precision killing, each serving a different aspect of her expanding mission parameters. She was still a medic, still committed to preserving life and reducing suffering, but she had demonstrated that those goals sometimes required the elimination of threats rather than the treatment of injuries. The movement back toward base required careful attention to terrain and potential observation points. Maya had identified several locations where enemy forces might establish surveillance positions, places where the natural terrain offered concealment and good visibility over the approaches to the base. She moved with the deliberate caution that came from understanding that survival often depended on remaining invisible to those who wished her harm. The first kilometer of movement took her through terrain that was similar to her firing position. Rocky and broken with good concealment, but difficult footing. Maya moved carefully but steadily, using the natural features to mask her progress while maintaining awareness of potential threats. The weight of her equipment was familiar and comfortable, distributed in a way that allowed sustained movement without fatigue. As she moved, Maya monitored the radio traffic between the returning patrol and base operations. The soldiers had reached the perimeter safely and were beginning the process of equipment, maintenance and debriefing that followed every patrol. Their voices carried the relaxed tone that came from successful completion of a dangerous mission, though Maya could detect underlying questions about the intervention that had saved their lives. The patrol leader's voice came through clearly as he provided his initial report to the operations center. Serpent Base, Viper 6. Patrol has returned to base, all personnel accounted for, no friendly casualties. We encountered a coordinated sniper ambush at Checkpoint Charlie that was neutralized by unknown friendly forces. Maya smiled grimly at the continued use of unknown friendly to describe her actions. The designation was technically accurate, since her presence on the ridge had not been authorized or coordinated through official channels. From the perspective of the patrol and base operations, She had appeared from nowhere to eliminate threats that they had not even detected, then disappeared back into the terrain without explanation. The second kilometer of movement took her through more open terrain where concealment was harder to achieve, but movement was faster. Maya adjusted her route to take advantage of shadows and vegetation. Maintaining a pace that would get her back to base before her absence became difficult to explain. The medical compound operated on a schedule that was predictable but not rigid, allowing for some flexibility in her movements without raising immediate questions. Her radio crackled with a direct communication from Colonel Harrison, his voice carrying the authority that came from command responsibility and growing frustration with unanswered questions. Serpent Medical provide estimated time of arrival at base and prepare for immediate debrief upon return. Maya keyed her radio, consulting her map and calculating the remaining distance to the perimeter. Serpent 6, estimate 20 minutes to base perimeter. I will report to operations upon arrival. Negative, Sergeant Chun. Report directly to my office. This situation requires immediate clarification. The order was clear and non-negotiable, reflecting the kind of command attention that Maya had hoped to avoid. Her actions on the ridge had achieved their primary objective of protecting the patrol, but they had also created a situation that would require explanation and justification. The military operated on clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and combat medics who eliminated entire sniper teams fell outside those established parameters. Maya continued her movement toward base, her mind already working through the questions that would inevitably be asked and the answers that she could reasonably provide. The truth was straightforward but complex, involving capabilities that she had developed through personal initiative rather than official training, equipment that existed in bureaucratic gray areas, and actions that had been necessary but unauthorized. The third kilometer brought her within sight of the base perimeter, the familiar outline of concrete barriers and guard towers, providing a sense of security that had been absent during her time on the ridge. Maya could see the normal activity of a forward operating base continuing around the perimeter, soldiers going about their duties with the routine efficiency that came from months of deployment. The gate guard was different from the one who had been on duty during her departure, a senior non-commissioned officer who recognized her immediately despite the dust and grime that covered her uniform. His expression suggested that word of her actions had already reached the perimeter guards, creating a level of attention that Maya had hoped to avoid. Sergeant Chun, the guard acknowledged with a nod that carried a mixture of respect and curiosity. Colonel Harrison is expecting you in his office immediately upon your return. Maya nodded her understanding and passed through the gate, walking toward the command post with the steady pace that she hoped would convey confidence rather than the uncertainty that she actually felt. The base seemed different somehow, as if her actions on the ridge had fundamentally changed her relationship with the familiar environment and the people who occupied it. The command post was a hub of activity as she approached, with officers and non-commissioned officers moving between offices and briefing rooms with the focused intensity that suggested significant events were being processed and analyzed. Maya could see several people watching her approach, their expressions ranging from professional interest to barely concealed amazement. Colonel Harrison's office was located on the second floor of the command post, accessible through a stairway that led past several other offices where Maya could see personnel working at computers and reviewing documents. The sound of her boots on the concrete steps seemed unnaturally loud, each footfall marking her progress toward a conversation that would determine the future direction of her military career. The outer office was occupied by a staff sergeant who served as the colonel's administrative assistant, a career soldier whose job involved managing the endless flow of paperwork and communications that accompanied command responsibility. He looked up as Maya entered, his expression professionally neutral, but with eyes that suggested he was aware of the unusual circumstances that had prompted this meeting. "Sergeant Chun," he acknowledged with a nod toward the inner office door. "Colonel Harrison is waiting for you. Go right in." Maya knocked twice on the doorframe before entering, coming to attention just inside the threshold in the manner prescribed by military courtesy. Colonel Harrison sat behind his desk, reviewing a folder that she assumed contained preliminary reports about the morning's events. He gestured toward a chair positioned in front of his desk, his expression serious but not hostile. "Sit down, Sergeant Chun. We need to discuss what happened on that ridge this morning." Maya took the indicated seat, maintaining the erect posture that was expected during formal meetings with senior officers. Her equipment was still packed in the bags that she carried, the specialized rifle and ghillie suit concealed, but undoubtedly generating questions that would need to be answered. Colonel Harrison opened the folder and consulted the top document, his eyes moving across the page with the deliberate care of someone who understood that details mattered in situations that fell outside normal parameters. When he looked up, his expression was thoughtful rather than accusatory. "According to the preliminary reports, you single-handedly eliminated 15 enemy snipers who had established an ambush position targeting one of our patrols. Is that assessment accurate?" Maya met his gaze directly, understanding that this moment would define her future relationship with the command structure and her fellow soldiers. "Yes, sir. I engaged 15 enemy personnel who posed an immediate threat to coalition forces. Using what weapons and equipment?" The question was direct and unavoidable, requiring her to acknowledge capabilities that had not been officially authorized or documented. Maya had prepared for this moment during her walk back to base, but the reality of answering was more difficult than the anticipation had suggested. "Sir, I employed a precision rifle that I assembled for force protection during medical evacuation operations. The weapon is not standard issue, but has been configured to provide overwatch capabilities when needed." Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression suggesting that he was processing information that challenged his FOSSEN understanding of combat medic capabilities and responsibilities. "Sergeant Chen, your personnel file indicates training as a combat medic with no specialized marksmanship instruction. How do you explain the level of precision demonstrated this morning?" Maya had expected this question and had prepared an answer that was truthful without being complete. "Sir, I grew up on a ranch where long-range shooting was necessary for predator control and hunting. The military provided additional training that refined those basic skills." "Additional training provided by whom?" The question probed deeper, into areas that Maya preferred to keep private, involving relationships and exchanges that had occurred outside official channels during previous deployments. She had learned from reconnaissance specialists and special operations personnel who had been willing to share knowledge in exchange for medical expertise, creating a network of skills and capabilities that existed in the margins of military bureaucracy. "Sir, I have received informal instruction from various personnel during previous deployments. The skills were developed to enhance my ability to provide medical support in contested environments." Colonel Harrison consulted another document in the folder, his expression suggesting that he was comparing Maya's statements with information from other sources. "The patrol leader reports that you provided advance warning about the sniper threat, warning that was based on your analysis of casualty patterns and terrain features. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir. I have been tracking enemy activity patterns for several months and had identified the ambush site as a likely location for coordinated attacks on our patrols. Why was this analysis not shared through official intelligence channels?" The question touched on the frustration that had been building for months as Maya's observations and warnings were dismissed or ignored by personnel who considered tactical analysis to be outside her area of responsibility. She chose her words carefully, seeking to explain without appearing to criticize the chain of command. "Sir, I submitted threat assessments through proper channels, but they were not considered actionable intelligence due to my primary classification as medical personnel." Colonel Harrison closed the folder and studied Maya with the direct gaze that senior officers develop through years of command experience. Sergeant Chun, you have presented me with a situation that falls outside normal parameters. A combat medic who conducts unauthorized intelligence analysis possesses precision marksmanship capabilities that exceed those of our designated marksmen, and single-handedly eliminates an entire enemy sniper team using equipment that does not officially exist. Maya remained silent, understanding that the colonel was working through the implications of her actions and their impact on unit operations and military protocol. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of questions that had no easy answers and consequences that would affect multiple people and organizations. When Colonel Harrison spoke again, his tone carried the measured consideration that came from balancing competing priorities and responsibilities. The fact remains that your actions saved the lives of 12 soldiers who would likely have been killed or wounded in the ambush. That result is more important than questions of authorization or protocol. Maya felt a sense of relief that was carefully concealed beneath her professional demeanor. The colonel's statement suggested that he was more concerned with effectiveness than with adherence to rigid procedures, a perspective that offered hope for a positive resolution to the situation. However, the colonel continued, we cannot ignore the broader implications of what occurred today. Your capabilities and equipment represent resources that could be valuable to unit operations if properly integrated and employed. The conversation was moving in a direction that Maya had not anticipated, toward recognition and potential utilization rather than discipline and restriction. She remained attentive but cautious, understanding that command decisions often involved complexities that were not immediately apparent. Colonel Harrison leaned forward, his expression becoming more focused and intentional. Sergeant Chun, I am prepared to authorize the creation of a special position that would allow you to continue your medical responsibilities, while also providing specialized support for patrol operations. The position would be unprecedented, but the results you demonstrated today suggest that unprecedented situations require unprecedented solutions. Maya felt her pulse quicken as she realized the implications of what the colonel was proposing. The opportunity to formalize her dual capabilities would allow her to contribute more effectively to unit operations while maintaining her primary mission as a combat medic. It was a chance to bridge the gap between healing and protecting in a way that had previously been impossible. Sir, I would be honored to serve in whatever capacity would be most beneficial to the unit and our mission. Colonel Harrison nodded, apparently satisfied with her response. The details will need to be worked out with higher headquarters, but I believe we can create a framework that accommodates your unique skill set while maintaining proper oversight and coordination. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes as the colonel explored the details of Maya's capabilities and the equipment she had employed. She answered his questions as completely as possible while maintaining appropriate discretion about sources and methods that she preferred to keep private. The discussion was professional and thorough, reflecting the colonel's understanding that unconventional problems often required unconventional solutions. When the meeting concluded, Maya left the command post with a sense of anticipation that was tempered by awareness of the challenges that lay ahead. The creation of a new position would require approval from multiple levels of command, involving bureaucratic processes that could take weeks or months to complete. In the meantime, she would continue her normal duties while quietly preparing for expanded responsibilities. The walk back to the medical compound took her past the maintenance areas where soldiers were cleaning weapons and equipment from the morning patrol. Several of them looked up as she passed, their expressions carrying a mixture of curiosity and respect that had not been present earlier in the day. Word of her actions had clearly spread throughout the base, creating a level of attention that would take some adjustment. The medical tent seemed smaller somehow when she returned, as if her expanded capabilities had outgrown the confines of her original mission. Maya began the process of reorganizing her equipment, separating the specialized items from the standard medical supplies while considering how to integrate her dual roles in the most effective manner possible. Her radio crackled with a message from the base medical officer, requesting her presence for a discussion about the morning's events and their implications for medical operations. Maya acknowledged the message and prepared to explain her actions once again, this time to someone who understood the complexities of providing medical care in a combat environment. The conversation with the medical officer was less formal than the meeting with Colonel Harrison, but equally important in establishing the framework for her future operations. The discussion covered medical protocols, equipment requirements, and coordination procedures that would be necessary if her role was expanded to include specialized security functions. As the day progressed, Maya found herself engaged in a series of meetings and discussions with various personnel who were working to understand the implications of her actions and develop appropriate responses. Each conversation added another layer of complexity to a situation that was unprecedented in their experience, but also offered opportunities to create new approaches to persistent problems. The evening brought a temporary respite from the intense scrutiny as Maya returned to the routine tasks that had defined her deployment for the past several months. She organized medical supplies, updated patient records, and prepared equipment for the next day's operations with the same methodical care that had always characterized her work. But everything had changed, even if the external routines remained the same. Maya was no longer just a combat medic whose warnings were dismissed and whose expertise was questioned. She had proven her capabilities in the most direct way possible, demonstrating skills that few people possessed and fewer still were willing to employ when circumstances required decisive action. The radio traffic that evening included reports from intelligence analysts who were examining the enemy sniper positions and attempting to understand the scope of the threat that had been eliminated. The preliminary findings suggested that the ambush had been more sophisticated than originally realized, involving professional personnel and equipment that exceeded local capabilities. Maya listened to the reports with professional interest, noting details that reinforced her earlier assessment of the enemy's evolving capabilities and intentions. The sniper team that she had eliminated represented a significant investment in training and equipment, resources that would not be expended on routine harassment operations. Their presence suggested a level of coordination and planning that required correspondingly sophisticated countermeasures. As night fell over the forward operating base, Maya reflected on the events of a day that had fundamentally changed her role and her relationship with the military organization that she served. She had crossed lines that could not be uncrossed, demonstrated capabilities that could not be ignored, and opened possibilities that had not previously existed. The challenges ahead would be significant, involving bureaucratic processes and organizational changes that would require time and patience to implement properly. But the foundation had been established for a new approach to the persistent problems of providing security and medical support in an environment where the two missions were increasingly difficult to separate. Maya had begun the day as a combat medic whose expertise was questioned and whose warnings were ignored. She was ending it as someone whose capabilities had been demonstrated beyond any doubt, whose value to unit operations had been proven through results rather than rhetoric. The transformation was complete, irreversible, and pregnant with possibilities that would define the remainder of her deployment and beyond. 3 weeks after the Ridge incident, Maya found herself in a position that would have been unthinkable just a month earlier. The newly created designation of Combat Medical Specialist had been approved through channels that reached all the way to division headquarters, establishing a precedent that would likely influence military doctrine for years to come. Her official duties now encompassed both traditional medical responsibilities and specialized security functions that were tailored to her unique combination of skills and experience. The transformation had not been without complications. Questions had been raised about the precedent being set, the implications for traditional role boundaries, and the wisdom of arming medical personnel with capabilities that exceeded those of designated combat specialists. Maya had found herself at the center of debates that involved senior officers, policy analysts, and doctrine developers who were attempting to understand how her situation fit within established military frameworks. The specialized equipment that had once existed in bureaucratic gray areas was now officially recognized and supported through proper procurement channels. Maya's precision rifle had been formally cataloged as organizational equipment, with ammunition and maintenance support provided through the same channels that supplied other specialized weapon systems. The ghillie suit and associated gear had been similarly legitimized, transforming improvised solutions into standard equipment for the new position. The medical compound had been reorganized to accommodate Maya's expanded role, with additional space allocated for specialized equipment and planning materials. A secure storage area had been constructed for her precision rifle and associated gear, accessible only to authorized personnel and protected by the same security measures that governed other sensitive equipment. The integration had been seamless, reflecting the careful planning that had gone into creating the new position. Maya's daily routine now included briefings with intelligence personnel, coordination meetings with patrol leaders, and specialized training sessions designed to maintain and improve her unique capabilities. The schedule was demanding but rewarding, offering opportunities to contribute to mission success in ways that had previously been impossible through traditional medical channels. The response from other personnel had been mixed but generally positive. The soldiers who had been on the patrol that she had saved were unequivocally supportive, their gratitude overriding any concerns about unconventional role definitions. Other medical personnel had been curious and somewhat envious, recognizing the opportunities for expanded mission contribution that Maya's position represented. Some resistance had come from traditional combat specialists who questioned the wisdom of expanding medical personnel responsibilities into areas that had historically been their exclusive domain. The concerns were understandable but had been addressed through careful explanation of the unique circumstances that had led to the position's creation and the specific qualifications that Maya possessed. The first official mission under her new designation had come just 10 days after the position was established. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces were planning another coordinated attack, this time targeting a convoy route that was critical for base resupply operations. Maya's analysis of the terrain and enemy patterns had identified several likely ambush sites, information that was now taken seriously by planning personnel. The mission had involved positioning herself in overwatch positions along the convoy route, providing both medical support capabilities and precision fire support if needed. The convoy had completed its movement without incident, but Maya's presence had been felt by enemy forces, who had observed her positioning and decided that the risk of engagement was too high to justify an attack. The success had validated the concept behind her new position, demonstrating that the combination of medical expertise and specialized combat capabilities could provide unique value in situations where traditional approaches were insufficient. The mission had been carefully documented and analyzed, contributing to the development of procedures and protocols that would guide future operations. Maya's relationship with the base medical officer had evolved into a partnership that balanced traditional medical responsibilities with the requirements of her expanded role. The medical officer had initially been skeptical about the wisdom of arming medical personnel with lethal capabilities, but the proven effectiveness of the approach had overcome his reservations. The integration had required careful attention to medical ethics and the principles that governed treatment of wounded personnel. Maya's expanded capabilities did not change her fundamental obligation to provide medical care to anyone who needed it, regardless of their status as friend or enemy. The precision rifle was a tool for protecting those under her care, not a weapon for pursuing offensive operations against enemy personnel. Training requirements for the new position had been developed through consultation with subject matter experts from various specialties, creating a curriculum that maintained medical proficiency while developing the additional skills necessary for effective performance in the expanded role. Maya found herself attending courses and training exercises that had previously been reserved for reconnaissance specialists and designated marksmen. The training was intense and comprehensive, covering topics that ranged from advanced camouflage techniques to target identification procedures. Maya excelled in most areas, her natural aptitude for precision shooting, combining with her medical knowledge to create capabilities that were unique within the military structure. One particular training exercise had involved a scenario where enemy forces had captured coalition personnel and were holding them in a fortified position that was beyond the reach of conventional rescue operations. Maya's mission had been to provide overwatch and precision fire support for a rescue team, using her medical knowledge to assess the condition of captured personnel and her marksmanship skills to neutralize threats that posed immediate danger. The exercise had been successful, with Maya demonstrating the ability to make split-second decisions about target priorities while maintaining awareness of medical considerations that affected the welfare of captured personnel. The performance had impressed observers from higher headquarters who were evaluating the effectiveness of the new position concept. Recognition of Maya's achievements had come through both official and unofficial channels. She had been awarded a Bronze Star with V device for her actions during the Ridge incident, recognition that placed her among the small number of medical personnel who had received decorations for valor. The award ceremony had been attended by senior officers from throughout the region, reflecting the significance that was attached to her accomplishments. More meaningful to Maya than the official recognition was the respect that she had earned from her fellow soldiers. The dismissive attitudes and casual condescension that had characterized previous interactions had been replaced by genuine appreciation for her capabilities and contributions. She was no longer seen as just a medic who occasionally offered unwelcome opinions about tactical matters, but as a valued team member whose expertise could make the difference between mission success and failure. The success of Maya's position had generated interest from other units that were facing similar challenges in integrating medical support with security requirements. Requests for consultation and training assistance had begun arriving from bases throughout the theater, indicating that the concept was being considered for broader implementation. Maya had participated in several of these consultation visits, sharing her experiences in helping other units develop their own approaches to the challenges of providing medical support in contested environments. The work was rewarding but demanding, requiring her to articulate lessons learned and best practices in ways that could be understood and implemented by personnel with different backgrounds and experience levels. The development of doctrine and procedures for the combat medical specialist position had become a collaborative effort involving multiple organizations and specialties. Maya found herself working with personnel from medical commands, special operations units, and doctrine development centers to create frameworks that could guide future implementation of similar positions. The work was complex and sometimes frustrating, involving considerations that ranged from legal and ethical issues to logistical and training requirements. Maya's practical experience provided valuable input for discussions that might otherwise have remained theoretical, grounding the development process in real-world situations and proven results. One significant challenge had involved developing rules of engagement that were appropriate for medical personnel who possessed lethal capabilities. Traditional medical roles were governed by principles that emphasized healing and protection, while combat roles operated under different ethical and legal frameworks. Maya's position required a careful balance between these competing considerations. The solution had involved creating specific guidelines that authorized the use of lethal force only in situations where medical personnel or patients were under immediate threat and no other means of protection were available. The guidelines were restrictive but clear, providing the authority necessary for effective operation while maintaining the ethical principles that governed medical practice. Maya's equipment had continued to evolve as experience revealed areas where improvements could be made. The precision rifle had been upgraded with a more advanced optic system that provided better performance in low-light conditions, reflecting lessons learned during night operations. The ghillie suit had been modified to accommodate additional medical equipment, ensuring that her primary mission capabilities were not compromised by the specialized gear. Communication equipment had been particularly important, requiring systems that allowed Maya to coordinate with medical evacuation assets while maintaining contact with supported units. The solution had involved specialized radio configurations that provided encrypted communications on multiple frequencies, allowing seamless integration with both medical and tactical networks. The success of the combat medical specialist position had not gone unnoticed by enemy forces, who had begun adapting their tactics to account for the enhanced capabilities that Maya represented. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy commanders were aware of her presence and were factoring her capabilities into their planning processes. The response had included attempts to identify and target Maya specifically, recognizing that eliminating her would significantly degrade the base's ability to conduct certain types of operations. The threats had been taken seriously, resulting in enhanced security measures and modified operational procedures designed to protect her while maintaining mission effectiveness. Maya's training had expanded to include personal security techniques and threat recognition procedures, skills that were necessary for anyone who had become a high-value target for enemy forces. The training was sobering, serving as a reminder that success in her new role brought increased risks as well as expanded opportunities. The psychological aspects of her transformation had been as significant as the operational changes. Maya had always been comfortable with the responsibility that came with medical duties, but the addition of lethal capabilities had introduced new dimensions of stress and decision-making that required careful management. Counseling support had been made available to help her process the implications of taking enemy lives, even in situations where such actions were clearly justified and necessary. The sessions had been helpful in maintaining the emotional balance necessary for effective performance in a role that required both compassion and ruthlessness depending on circumstances. The impact of Maya's success had extended beyond her immediate unit to influence discussions about gender roles and capabilities within the military structure. Her demonstrated proficiency in areas that had traditionally been dominated by male personnel had contributed to broader conversations about opportunity and equality in combat specialties. Maya had been careful to avoid becoming a symbol or spokesperson for broader social issues, preferring to focus on mission accomplishment and professional competence rather than political considerations. Her success spoke for itself, providing evidence that capability and performance were more important than traditional role expectations. The development of training programs for future combat medical specialists had become a priority as other units expressed interest in implementing similar positions. Maya had been heavily involved in designing curricula and qualification standards that would ensure consistent performance across different organizations and deployment environments. The training programs were comprehensive and demanding, requiring candidates to demonstrate proficiency in both medical and marksmanship skills, while maintaining the highest standards of professional and ethical conduct. The selection process was rigorous, recognizing that the combination of capabilities required exceptional individuals who could operate effectively under extreme pressure. Maya's role as a mentor and instructor had been as rewarding as her operational duties, providing opportunities to share knowledge and experience with personnel who would carry forward the innovations that she had helped to develop. The teaching Responsibilities had required her to articulate lessons learned and best practices in ways that could be understood and implemented by others. The first group of combat medical specialist candidates had graduated from the training program just 2 weeks earlier, with 3 individuals achieving the qualifications necessary for assignment to operational units. Maya had been present for the graduation ceremony, feeling a sense of pride in the accomplishments of personnel who would continue the work that she had begun. The long-term implications of the combat medical specialist position were still being evaluated, but early indications suggested that the concept would become a permanent addition to military capabilities. The demonstrated effectiveness of combining medical expertise with specialized combat skills had proven valuable, enough to justify the investment in training and equipment necessary for broader implementation. Maya's personal plans had evolved, along with her professional role, recognizing that her unique combination of skills and experience would continue to be valuable throughout her military career and beyond. The opportunities for advancement and specialization within her new field were extensive, offering pathways that had not existed when she first joined the military as a traditional combat medic. The recognition that had come with her success had opened doors to positions and assignments that would have been impossible through conventional medical channels. Maya was already being considered for instructor positions at advanced training centers and staff assignments that would involve the development of new doctrine and procedures. The evening routine at the forward operating base had become more complex as Maya's responsibilities had expanded. Her day now ended with detailed planning sessions for the following day's operations, coordination calls with higher headquarters, and equipment maintenance that ensured readiness for any mission that might arise. The medical compound remained her primary workspace, but it had been transformed into something that resembled a combination medical facility and tactical operations center. Maps and intelligence reports shared wall space with medical supplies and treatment equipment, reflecting the integration of capabilities that defined her new role. Maya's personal equipment was maintained to the same standards that governed other specialized military gear, with regular inspections and maintenance procedures that ensured optimal performance when needed. The precision rifle was cleaned and inspected daily, its optic system checked and calibrated to maintain the accuracy that could mean the difference between success and failure in critical situations. The relationship between Maya's medical and combat responsibilities had become seamless through months of experience and training. She could transition between treating wounded personnel and engaging enemy threats without conscious thought, her responses automatic and appropriate to whatever situation presented itself. The respect that Maya had earned from her fellow soldiers was perhaps the most meaningful aspect of her transformation. The dismissive attitudes and casual condescension that had once characterized interactions with combat personnel had been replaced by genuine appreciation for her capabilities and contributions to mission success. The conversations that took place in the dining facility and recreation areas now included Maya as an equal participant in discussions about tactics and operations, her input valued and her opinion sought on matters that had previously been considered outside her area of expertise. The change reflected a broader recognition that competence and results were more important than traditional role boundaries. As she prepared for sleep on what had been another successful day in her expanded role, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from a dismissed combat medic to a recognized specialist whose capabilities were integral to unit operations. The transformation had required courage to act outside established parameters, persistence to overcome bureaucratic obstacles, and professionalism to maintain the highest standards of conduct throughout the process. The challenges ahead would be significant as the combat medical specialist position became more widely implemented and its procedures became more standardized. Maya would play a key role in that development, contributing her experience and expertise to the creation of frameworks that would guide future personnel in similar positions. The success that she had achieved represented more than personal accomplishment. It was validation of the principle that innovation and adaptation were essential for military effectiveness in an evolving threat environment. Maya's willingness to challenge conventional boundaries had created new possibilities for protecting and caring for the soldiers who served alongside her. The 16 enemy snipers who had planned to kill 12 coalition soldiers would never threaten anyone again. Their elimination had been accomplished by someone whose primary mission was healing rather than killing, demonstrating that the distinction between those roles was often less clear than military doctrine suggested. Maya Chun had proven that a medic could save lives through any means necessary, whether that involved battlefield surgery or precision marksmanship. Her story had become part of the unit's history, told and retold in the informal networks that preserved the memory of exceptional service and extraordinary courage. Future personnel would learn about the combat medic who had refused to accept the limitations that others tried to impose on her capabilities, who had developed the skills necessary to protect her fellow soldiers, regardless of what those skills might be called. The impact of Maya's transformation would extend far beyond her individual service, influencing military doctrine and inspiring other personnel to push beyond conventional role boundaries when mission requirements demanded innovative solutions. She had demonstrated that excellence was not confined to traditional specialties, that the most effective military personnel were those who adapted their capabilities to meet evolving challenges rather than accepting artificial limitations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.